So you imagine a person dressed very nicely. They've got a black gown. They're sitting behind this big podium. They've got a gavel and they bang on it and they say, "Order in my courtroom," or "Mr. Kumete, get out of my courtroom," or "You're guilty," or they read a piece of paper and they say, "You are not the father," or "You are the father." So that's television, but a lot of those elements, are actually what transpires on the inside of the traditional courtroom as we know it. In Africa, in our jurisdiction, especially here in the kingdom of Eswatini, we have, different kinds of courts. We've got the family court, we've got umpagati sitting as, a structure that's actually going to adjudicate on issues, on grievances, and mete out punishments, or give sanctions, or make specific rulings and orders, and they can even have those executed. By a sheriff or by a police officer, they can execute it themselves, and so on and so forth. And so those are some of the things that are going to be looked at the Ngandolo podcast. Now, this is a platform that's on YouTube. I'm its host. I've got horrible manners. I forgot to say that my name is Vilimile Kumete. Of course, it should appear, on my profile. But the Ngandolo podcast is just a platform where one just goes to kind of see some of the decisions that have come from our courts. In season one, we're specifically looking at decisions that have come from the Supreme Court. I'm intrigued by the whole, court system, as we know it. I think it's extremely interesting because it's a place where, members of society go to vent out or ventilate the issues that they have, and have decisions that come from the court, if the court is the correct place for those issues to be decided. It's got various actors, it's got attorneys, it's got advocates, it's got litigants, plaintiffs, defendants, applicants, respondents, appellants, respondents. What does all of that mean? I'm not the only person who's interested, and I know that there's people who are watching this right now thinking, yeah, I'm also intrigued by what happens on the inside of the courts and what is it that all these lawyers are doing. Um, and the Ngandolo podcast is just that. It's a place where you can go find out how the Supreme Court, well, at least in season one, the Supreme Court has decided cases ranging from, theft of motor vehicles, um, tampering with the chassis numbers on an engine, the consequences of that, and what happens if the car is stolen in a different country. Um, sort of looking at how an estate devolves after a person has passed away and they've left, an inheritance to their wife. In our jurisdiction, sometimes wives and children, and, some of the squabbles that sort of come out of that, or what happens in a situation where one person takes the whole piece of land and uses it for a farm, and goes and seeks, funding on the basis of something that's actually a family farm. you know if you ask me, land is one of the most important issue that's being decided in our courts, literally on a daily basis. So we've got to sort of sometimes just sit back and unpack what goes on the inside of the courtroom, and see how judges come to the decisions that they make, the rationale, or the reasons for how they reason, or how they reason when they make the judgments that they make, which affect the lives of an ordinary human being. So head over to the Ngandolo podcast. I'm certainly going to leave the link to the Ngandolo podcast, which is on YouTube, in the comments section down below. Let's interact. Let's have a chat. Let's see what's happening in our courts. Thus far, I've put up some 5 episodes, at least, just speaking on a range of those issues, and specifically coming from the Supreme Court. You know, at the end of the day, we're going to unpack some of the what we call, locus classici, or some of the most important cases that have settled a particular position in the law that must now be adopted and followed by by all the courts. And the law is always changing. We want to look at that at the Ngandolo podcast. So head over there and see if you find anything interesting. For the most part, the episodes are about 10 minutes. I do have one, the fifth episode, which is about 21 minutes. There's also going to be some shorts that you'll be seeing here from time to time, just sort of speaking to the various issues, like who are the participants in the courtroom. You have litigants who come in. Why must you have a case number? Who's the sheriff? What's his job? Can you go to the police if somebody has, you know, um, backtracked on an agreement that the two of you had? Is the police are the police the correct, sort of structure or people that you should approach? So these are all technical questions, but I don't intend to, get very teachy with the Nganola podcast. I simply just want to have a look at case law, how it's been decided, at least in season one, from our highest court, which is the Supreme Court here in the Kingdom of Eswatini. Look at the composition of that court. Is it one judge sitting? Is it three judges sitting? Is it five? Why one? Why three? Why five? When it's a constitutional matter, or the complexity of the matter, and who's an advocate, who's an attorney? Why do you need an advocate? Why do we have such a small number of advocates in our jurisdiction? And that speaks to issues of economy, and you unpack a lot of it by yourself, but just to kind of see what the courts at least have decided, which is a place that intrigues me, and I know intrigues a whole lot of people. Head over to the Ngandolo podcast and check it out. And so thank you for sticking with me for this little mini podcast. I don't even know, it's probably 5 minutes now. But thank you for tuning in. I'm Vilimile Gumete, and until next time, adios.